Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time again for another episode of Letters to God. The one show, maybe the only show, that asks the question, is anybody listening? Well, we hope you're listening because we got some interesting guests, some always stimulating ideas from the man who stimulates everybody with his conversations. Dr. Trin, are you there somewhere driving around Orange County here?
I am here. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah, surprisingly.
I'm actually parked now. I'm no longer driving. But yes, I'm excited to bring Mr. Thomas Nastek here with us today to talk about the relevance of what happens when God is out of the picture in our public life, in our life, and what may potentially happen when God's back in the picture. And excited to hear about the trilogy that he's written. So welcome.
Thomas Nastek. He didn't write a trilogy. That'd be a book about 3 books about trees. He wrote a trilogy here.
Oh, yeah.
A trilogy called, what's the name of it again?
It's Penury City.
Penury City. Define for those of us, because I'm going to run I sort of know penury has something about poverty or poorness,
right.
but that's not a word I use very often in my vocabulary. Why that term, and what does it mean?
So yeah, penury means extreme poverty. And so that's kind of the whole premise behind the trilogy is when you live in a society without God, that is the extreme poverty that you can be living in.
We are poor because of it. We are poor because of our absence of God here. All right. So tell us a background of you. Who are you? How'd you get here? And why did you write this book? And then we'll talk about what it is.
Right. So yeah, thank you. I'm Thomas Nastek. I've been really in engineering and technology for about 36 years. And I spent most of my career as an architect, a systems architect, and trying to really bring together the people, the talent that people have, all of the different processes that we have in engineering and science, and then also the innovation and creativity that we have available to us today. So those are the 3 elements, kind of the triangle of what we really see in engineering and science today. And I spent my entire career really trying to deliver on a promise that was delivered back at the 1934 World's Fair in New York.
The 1934 World's Fair. You remember the 1934 World's Fair, yeah. Dr. Trin? I don't think he does.
I don't remember any World's Fair back in the 1930s.
I didn't even know that.
You could Google it.
All
yes, right. I will.
You're going to Google the 1930. That's the setup. Something in 1934 hit you at this World's Fair, and there was a promise made, which was what?
Well, that was the promise of technology. And that promise was that with technology, we would have our homes automated, we would have our offices automated, which would save us a lot of time doing the mundane tasks that we have today, so that we could get back out into the world, have more time with our families, have more time with our friends, and with nature, with our faith, with God. And it was the promise. And we failed miserably on delivering that promise, because as you can see, we're tied 24/7 to the office now. We have,
and it was supposed to free us. That's a good point. Technology in the early days, when we moved from well, let's just, I'm a history major, so let's unpack this a little bit. In the late 1900s, the majority of people worked in farms or mills or mines or whatever. It wasn't it was a lot of grind. You got up at dawn and you worked till dusk because you couldn't work at night. There was no lighting. So you got as much every hour you squeezed something out of it, and it was a hard life. You fought. For many of us, there were the Rockefellers and others who benefited from this new emerging industrial society. But for most of us, it was a grind. You lived in smoky filled places like Pittsburgh. You couldn't see the sun half the time, as my great grandmother used to tell me when she worked in the mines there. It wasn't a real plus. So technology was supposed to come along and free us from being farm animals, from being tied to the yoke. And instead, you're saying we just switched one burden for another, one yoke for another.
Well, I think we forgot the promise. And when things started to get hard because of the complications of all these different technological advances, we shortcutted different things in order to make it deliver quicker to market, make more money. So we started putting the burden of some of these problems on the user to figure out. If you look at technology today,
isn't that the truth?
it is very complicated.
And there's nobody to call. You can't call up somebody. I can't figure. I have this problem with a computer. I just bought a laptop. There is a good case in point. I'm going to rant for a second. I just bought a laptop from a big, I won't name the big store here in Orange County where that sells computers, and it didn't work. I loaded it up with some stuff, and there's some sort of underlying conflict, and now this one doesn't work and it doesn't hook up to the internet, and I can't get it to do this. And the first 10 minutes, the service tech started scolding me. Well, you have too many programs. Well, you can't put this in here. Why do you have McAfee in here? That slows down the computer. Why do you have so many tabs open? I said, I don't need you lecturing me. I need you to fix it. I bought it from you. Fix it. And he's scolding me like, you bad child. How dare you? You're supposed to put this pristine machine and have one thing in it, and it'll work fine. The minute you load it up and do all this, oh, I can't. It's not my fault. Go talk to all the software manufacturers. And then they'll say, not my fault. It's the machine's fault. And ultimately, it's supposed to be my fault. And I have to figure it out. Yeah, right.
So that's the promise that we failed to deliver on. And like I said, I tried spending a lot of my career trying to bring that promise back, but
but you gave up. I gave up. I can't do it.
Yeah, that was a total failure. So instead of doing that, I said, well, what else can I do? What's God calling me to do now? So there's a lot of background, and I don't want to bore you with coming about within the church, because the church is really the start of a lot of the sciences. We had the first observatory, we had the first medic, we had the first hospitals, we had the first universities, we had the first the library, the museums. All were brought about the Catholic Church.
They were an anti-knowledge here, but there's no question that
But what the church is slow.
Yeah.
So when Galileo came about with his theories, and they were all talking amongst the scientific community in the church, they said to wait. They said, please wait until we can verify some of the things that you're saying. And they were taking too long, and Galileo was a prideful kind of person, and he just said, you know what, I'm not waiting, I'm releasing this, and here we go.
Here we go.
And the church kind of didn't like that, because the church likes to make sure when they release information, if you think about how long it takes for them to do sainthood, they take their time, they make sure that they cover, because they don't want to be wrong, because if they're wrong,
can't take it back.
Everyone says, oh, look at the church, they don't know what they're doing. They don't, right?
Yeah.
So you always have to look for the truth, because there is always a truth. It's just people don't want to wait for it.
Or they don't want to accept it when they see it, that there is pox on the moon here, and maybe that doesn't fit the previous theories here. We always have. So again, you're a man of reason, you're a man of faith. You spent your career architectural engineer. I guess you're trying to make all these little systems work together and trying to integrate all this technology and figure out how to use it for the benefit of mankind, not the not the burden. And give us more things to worry about, more things to struggle with. What do you think, Dr. Trin? You like technology? Is technology the enemy? Should we go back to, have the Amish got it right? We should have just stopped all technology in the 1700s.
Does science and faith mix together? Or are they like...
oil and water.
Should they be separate, or do they kind of, mix well?
No, I think you cannot separate God from anything, because God is in everything. And so when you pursue science, you are really pursuing God's design in all things. There's God in all things. He created it. He's the master architect, right?
Right.
And so when you pursue science, you're really looking for truth. And when you do it correctly, you will find truth, and you will find God's designs.
And that was, when you look at so many, I don't care if it was, but go through all the early church scholars and stuff, they weren't trying to disprove God. They were trying to they were really trying to prove this must be some sort of divine intelligence. Too much design here for it just to have happened accidentally here. There must be some creative intelligence driving this. It's too complex, it's too perfect, it's too well thought out. The whole the universe and the laws of physics and science and all these things are too too intricate and involved and precise to have just evolved. That's the typical argument for God. But somewhere along the way in today's world, for many Christians, I don't believe that. Scientists, Dr. Fauci comes out and says something, I don't believe it, just because I don't believe science. Oh, he's a scientist. He's just trying to
I don't want to get into politics.
But we have come to a place where science is seen as the enemy of faith. There's faith and there's science, and the two can't seem to live together. For me, it was always science. Faith begins where science ends. I can only figure out so much, and then some point I just got to have faith in something.
Yeah, so for me, science is always trying to understand the truth of things.
Right.
And when you do that, like I said, when you do it and you do it correctly, a lot of our science, you have to remember, is built on a lot of assumptions.
Oh yeah.
Because we can only go so far, and we have to start making assumptions. And some of those assumptions are built on our historical past. So you have assumptions upon assumptions upon assumptions upon assumptions. What if that first one was wrong? And even all of Einstein's theories, they couldn't be proven until far after he had passed away.
We're still trying to prove some of them. We're still trying to figure out if some of them are true or not.
So there's theory, which, there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah.
The science is trying to, how can we put into a controlled environment and try to reduce as many of the variables as we possibly can to start to and prove out the theories and the understanding that we have. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I think some people think that faith is when, we can't figure out science, or we don't believe science, and faith is just, we just have this blind faith in something because we don't understand it enough to realize anything different.
Well, go back to evolution when that theory came, more and more of the historical evidence said, hey, there were creatures that came and went, and they changed over time. They evolved, they adapted to their environment, and those that were able to adapt lived, and those that didn't died. No? You don't...
So evolution, we can't evolve and gain function of something that we didn't have. Evolution is more of the systematic removal of things that we are no longer needed.
Like a tail, but humans don't have a tail anymore. We have a tailbone.
We have a tailbone.
Right.
And it kind of helps keep us balanced in things, but we don't gain wings. Like, we've been flying for a long time. We have a set of wings on the back of you that...
No, right. You can't, you don't grow a third eye. But yes, and that's why it is evolution. It's not revolution. I don't suddenly grow 5 arms or something here. But there are mutations that happen, and those adapt better to the environment, and they tend to survive. And the ones that don't have those adaptations or can't adapt tend to die out.
Or like you can have mutations that are actually where, like, your eye color, if you have blue eyes, that's a mutation, because before, I think it was like 10,000 years ago, it mutated, and the eye color of blue came. Before that, everyone had basically brown or darker eyes. Right.
So all of these things, all I'm saying is that there is an understanding, there's a belief today, I think it's very common today, that and I think particularly among Christians, and I'm a Christian, is that too many Christians see faith and science as adversaries. That you're just trying to prove that there's nothing there. And I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to accept blindly. God said it, I read it, that's the way it is. And we're not going to discuss or think about anything else. And so we're in the middle of it right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and there are those that say this, the scientists are saying, look, this isn't left, right, or center. I'm just telling you what we're seeing, what the data is showing us. And there are people denying it, despising it, fighting it.
I've done a lot of research on some of that, and like I said, I don't want to get too political because it just goes
you can go off the tracks here, but there is a conflict today.
But
for
there
some
are
reason.
A set of scientists who are arguing both sides, so you just have to, which scientist do you want to listen to?
Well,
because even the inventor of the mRNA vaccination is saying different things. So I
Well,
don't know.
and which
Like I said,
faith do you want
a lot
to?
of things are political.
Do you want to be
Faith
Catholic or
has,
do you want to be evangelical? Something here. I mean, you can find your faith just like you can find your facts. Whichever one you think you sort of search for the one that you think is true, and a lot of times it's based on your bias, isn't it? Your own belief of that's what I believe. So good, somebody else believes that.
so I tend to, so I like traditions. There are good traditions and there are bad traditions. And as usual, you have to search out the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a historical past, as humanity does, and we learned a lot of things from our history, and sometimes we forget. And just in my own history, my 36 years of technology, I've seen it happen where we start out with centralized control. So if you grew up in or had anything to do with technology in the 70s, 90s, you had those big computers, right? The
Right.
AES 400 systems, the mainframe computers, and you had these little dumb terminals.
Right.
And so it was centralized computing. So you had a central computer and you had these distributed dumb terminals that were dumb. They didn't do anything. You needed the centralized computer to hook up to.
Right.
To get
They're just
information.
nodes. The brain was somewhere else. Right. Yeah.
So then after that we had the desktops, the PCs, and they had distributed computing. So now the brains were in these local desktop machines,
Right.
and then you could disconnect from the network and they would still work.
Right.
You didn't have to be reliant on some centralized control. But now we've forgotten that history of how that was better. We're starting to go back more to centralized control. Now everything's on the internet. It's in the cloud. And if the cloud goes away, if the cloud doesn't work, if the cloud has functionality in it that you don't particularly like, it doesn't matter because you're stuck with it.
Yeah. Right.
And more of the engineering is relying on more and more of the functionality in the cloud. So they're all developing based on that functionality instead of developing new things on their own. So in order to go to market quicker, let me just use the functions that are in the cloud and then I can build off of that.
Right.
Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. But like I said, we fail to learn from our history. So when it comes to faith or science, we have to remember that historical past and we have to learn from it and build on it and not just keep repeating it, because we're doomed to repeat our history over and over, it seems.
That's the ultimate takeaway. We keep getting reminded that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, as whoever, the writer Santayana or whoever said that. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, how does God get into this equation? You've been a scientist looking at, should it be centralized, should it be decentralized? Is technology here to free us and liberate us, or does technology just add new burdens and new yokes to us here? Where does God come into the discussion here?
Well, like I said, God is everywhere. And one of the things why I've written a trilogy is you can see the signs of the times, right? Some people say we're in the end times. Some people say we're at the end of the age, because our tradition and other traditions, Christian traditions, believe different things.
We could be in a transition from one age to another, so it may seem like the end, but it's the beginning of something else here, right?
Exactly. So we're trying to figure out, okay, well, how did we get here? And if you look at America, we had God in our Constitution, we had God in Declaration of Independence, we had God in the system, we had in God we trust and all our money. So
right.
God was everywhere initially. Then we slowly started removing them. We separated the church and state. We took God out of the judicial system. We no longer swear an oath before God when you go to court.
Mm-hmm.
We took God out of schools. We took God out of family planning. We took God out of family. So the first volume of Penury City is really what happens to a society when you remove God from all things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the extreme poverty that you find yourself living in, because now there's no truth. There's no objective truth. Everybody has their version of a truth. It's like, well, I don't like your truth. I like my truth, and that's what I'm going to say. And you have to call me by my own truth. So you start losing the objectivity to God, which
there's
is
no right or
one
wrong.
truth.
There's no discernible good or bad.
Everybody gets to feel happy in whatever truth they want to live in.
And that
So
is
that's
the
what
that is
happens.
the truth of today. Through social media, we find our own little bubbles, and we live in that truth, good or bad.
Right.
And we tend to only associate with others who hold similar views of the truth. And I don't want to hear anything. And so we've come up with things like fake news or alternative facts or whatever, which just simply means we live in these little echo chambers, these little bubbles, and they seem
Right.
to be you watch one TV channel, you listen to one person talk, you go to one religious thing, and they sound radically different. Their interpretation of what's happening around me is completely different than somebody else's interpretation.
Right. So it all starts with, okay, well, take God out of mankind. And if you look at through the scripture and through the Bible, and you read a lot of the Old Testament and through the New Testament, and you just see this story repeat itself over and over again. Israel, has a relationship with God, and they're with God, and they have God with them, and they're following the rules, and they're doing the right things, and everything is fine. And then they start turning away from God. They start pulling God out of the things. Like, oh, don't, God, I got this.
I got this.
I'll come visit you once a year at the temple, but otherwise I'm good. I got this. So don't worry about it. And we keep doing that, and eventually we start getting more and more prideful until we remove God completely. Just like in the Old Testament, when that happens to Israel, then things don't go so well for Israel. They get conquered, they get strewn about, they get divided until they repent and come back to God and make things right again. And so it's the endless cycle of, and when you read through the Old Testament, you're like, oh, won't these people ever learn?
Right.
They keep doing the same things.
But is that I'm gonna give you a challenging question here, and I'm not trying to pin you to go in a direction you don't want to go, but I wonder sometimes if our democratic system, which is everybody has a vote, everybody has a voice, everybody's idea is valid until proven otherwise here, and everybody has a different religion, everybody has a different culture, we're a mixture of the world's ideas and cultures, and people all come together in one place with some shared ideas: freedom, opportunity, equality. Those are the things that unite us. In that system, where every vote counts and every voice is valid, don't we at some point in time struggle with, well, I can't even define who God is. You think God is this. I think God is this. You pray to this God. I pray to another God. I pray to no God. And so you get this, at some point, I think the wisdom of the forefathers, and yet you're saying maybe the flaw in our system is, they said, we're not going to argue about it anymore. Europeans fought wars between Catholics and Protestants for 400 years in that definition. And then we fought crusades against Muslims and everything else. Everybody trying to figure out, fight for my right, my way is the one way. So we want to put God back in. Whose God are we going to put back in? How do we even decide a definition for God these days?
Well, there's a lot in what you were saying. First of all, everyone is not created equal as far as being able to decide and make choices and lead things, right? We're all created as far as being equal. We have a divinity to each person. Each person has value, and they have a divinity within themselves that God created and put there. So we all have value, but we are not all equal.
All right, so you got to push that a little further. What does that mean? Like, so we have different talents or different? I'm high,
right, we
I'm
have
taller.
Different talents. We have
you're
different. And one of the things that this came out when I was doing different things in architecture and trying to put teams together and engineering teams is, people wanted to go through these, they call them agile processes.
Yeah, I've read about a lot of agile processes.
And
these
everyone
scrums.
has
Yeah,
exactly. And everyone has a voice, and everyone has input, and everyone has, that just leads to chaos. Nothing gets done because everybody pulls everything in different directions, and you have to compromise so much that what you are trying to achieve gets lost, and you end up having this mediocrity of, I don't know what. Well, you have the technology that you have today. Right? So unless you have someone who has, okay, well, here's the vision of what we're trying to achieve. And then you acquire the experts in different areas who have the expertise in user interface design, and some others in database design, and some others in these different areas of engineering. you want to try to get the best of the best, and not everyone is the best, but they do have roles and they do have value. So not everyone gets a vote because that leads nowhere. What you do is you put the person in charge who's the best at that particular thing, and you let them drive it to where it needs to go.
Okay. What do you think of that, Dr. Trin? A little more, we need a little more command and control and a little less everybody gets a say?
I think there's a balance somewhere in there. And I think a lot of it depends on if we believe that truth is absolute or
Right.
truth is relative.
Right. There you go.
Right? If truth is relative, then everyone has a say, and you believe in your truth, right? But if there is a God and if there is a creator, and that God is God, right? What we would call an absolute truth, then maybe that mind shift should change a little bit with that relative truth.
There were some guardrails. There's some and that was
Yes.
in a political sense. Our Constitution was supposed to just to set some rules of the game, some boundaries here. Within the game, there are lots of things possible. You can rise and fall. Good things can happen. Bad things can happen. But there is a certain boundary that puts in place. When you start to remove all the boundaries and anything goes, then it's hard for societies or anything to function.
Right. Yeah, Dr. Trin's right. You need balance, and you need the best of both worlds. But you can't just have all of one and none of the other.
Because I
Just
grew up
doesn't
in a
work.
command and control world. Just shut up and do your job and don't talk. That was the way businesses were run. My parents, you didn't question them. I don't have to explain. You're doing it because I say to do it. And then the 60s and the 50s, the baby boomers said, well, wait a minute, I'm going to think about what is the meaning of life and am I happy doing that? My dad used to endlessly argue with me. I'd say, what am I supposed to do? And what am I looking for my purpose and meaning? He said, just go get a freaking job. What are you thinking about all this? Just get a job, start going. He came out of the Depression. They were just happy to be alive. We talked about this with immigrants that come over here. They're just happy I made it through this. Quit worrying so much. Just do something, anything.
Right. I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson. He's a
Sure.
clinical psychologist out of Canada, and he's a huge following on YouTube.
And he's somewhat controversial. Some people love him, some people don't. He's always being, he gets himself in trouble and he says something and then he's trying to say, I didn't say that. I'm just trying to say something. And everybody's like,
But one of the things that made him popular was because so many of the young people today, they were just sold a bill of goods. Like, okay, you go through school, you go to college, and it used to be where, well, at least you need a bachelor's degree. And it's like, well, no, that's not good enough anymore. Now you need a master's. No, that's not good enough anymore. Now you need a couple of masters and some minors to go with that because you have to keep elevating yourself. It's like, no.
Right.
Some people shouldn't be going to college because we need other things as well. And so that's part of, I think one of the things that we've lost in our society is we try to achieve things that others have achieved. And we put them up on these pedestals, say you have to do these things, you have to achieve this good. That's not what God wants for us. God created us, each of us, uniquely and perfect for the roles that we are to play in this world. He created us in a time and a space. He created us with a certain amount of talents and wisdom. And when we pursue God, we start to hear the mission and the adventure that he has planned for us. And I think when we are truly joyful, not necessarily happy, because happy is an emotion that you might be happy today and not tomorrow, or miserable today and happy.
It's a short term. It's a short-term measurement of your life. Yeah. Am I happy right now?
When you have true joy to where the thing that you're doing makes you joyful in the fact that when you pursue it, you're going the right way because that thing that you're pursuing has value. So God creates each of us to really have this adventure, to serve the purpose that he meant for us to serve and being created. And so when we're in that right relationship with God and we start to listen to his small kind of nudges on where we're supposed to go in the directions that we're supposed to be going in, I think that's when we can truly find that joy in life that we need.
What do you think, Dr. Trin? Should we go back to more roles? We live in a world with you think it's a clean slate. I can be everybody gets a trophy. There's no winners and losers. Everybody has the same chance and opportunity, and we can all be chiefs. We don't need any Indians anymore. There's no. We're all leaders. We're all creators of our own life. We're all everything. I get all that. I'm sympathetic to a lot of that, but it does lead to less. I don't want that role. Maybe God made me to do this. I want to be a jockey, but I'm 6'4". I don't care if that's hard. I want to be a jockey. I want to be something here. So I don't.
There's a pill for that.
There's a pill for that, right? Yeah, right. A red pill or a blue pill here, right? And which reality do you want? At some point, that's the thing of growing up. You start to realize there are certain limitations on not only what I can accomplish, because of whatever. There are boundaries in place, and some of them you can overcome. They're artificial boundaries, some of which you can't overcome. But at some point, you're searching for that. The question is, who am I? That search, that meaning for life. We try everything. We look at everything. And I don't know that we really accept the notion that we were born to do something. We think I'm a blank slate and I can do everything. And if I don't, then I feel dissatisfied, unhappy, jealous, angry, depressed, because I can't be that. I can't do that. I can't be a superstar. I can't be rich. I can't be this. I can't be that. I can't be the perfect body, look or whatever. And so we're always chasing this impossible perfection and never really looking and saying, well, what's the clay, what's the mold? I was born in a certain mold in a certain way. What does that fit best? What do you think, Dr. Trin?
I think societal values have changed over time. We used to, back in 50, 60 years ago, we used to value what I would call the traditional family.
Right.
We used to value the traditional family. Husband,
Dad went to work,
wife,
mom stayed home. Yeah.
Kids. Dad went to work. Dad was the breadwinner. Mom stayed home. And if you look at today's values, it's the non-traditional family where that's emphasized. And so somewhere along the line, the values have changed for good or for worse. The values are different. We used to think of tolerance these days. Tolerance is probably the number one value in America. What I mean by that is, if you are quote unquote, if you don't tolerate who I am, or if you quote unquote hate on me because of whether it's my gender identity or the
way I look, who I pray to, what I believe.
You're a bad guy, right? If you are intolerant in any way. So that has been a value that has been uplifted as the number one value in America today. Of course, the funny thing is those sometimes who claim intolerance are also intolerant of those.
Yeah, right. I'm intolerant that you're intolerant. I'm intolerant of your intolerance. Right.
But yeah, I've noticed a change in values. The traditional family, organizations like Focus on the Family, which used to be a huge, everyone in America followed James Dobson, and now they're not as big.
Everyone used to belong to a religion, and according to the last Pew poll, less than half of us even have any sort of identity to any faith. We're sort of this amorphous other, none of the above.
Yeah, none of the above.
So here's my question to both of you. So I'll give you an example first. Dr. Trin and I had on a great guest on his other show, Health Talks, a little less spiritual and searching for answers, and a little more practical about what works. And he had a guy that probably would have worked on this show is equally on that, a guy who wrote a book, he's a Harvard professor or something, on just comparing the education system in Asia with the education system here in America. And we wonder why we're consistently behind in the standardized tests. Because they drive these kids, and it's a value, and it's an important, and Dr. Trin's talked about it. The Asian F is if you get a B. It doesn't just reflect on the kid; it reflects on the family. And there's an aspirational goal. We're all going to go to college. We're all going to do, and they teach much more the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and it's much more of a rote memorization. And they score higher on tests. But even Dr. Trent says, "But I want my kids to be happy, and I don't want them to be too." Just all brainy and all books. I want them to have a well-balanced life, and I want them to enjoy life and all these other things. When he's saying, well, you can't have it all. You can't have kids just wandering through making up their own curriculum and expecting they're going to learn everything. That might make them feel happier, but if your goal is to get them to score higher on SAT things, that's not the best way to do it. So we're back to that command and control traditional way of doing it. Or the everybody's equal, everybody's free to be me. I can do anything I want, and we're complete libertarians. There's no rules to the game. I can do anything I want, and don't tell me otherwise.
Yeah, so there's a lot of danger, I think, in saying there's no rules. You can be the most creative and innovative when you follow the rules. I mean, just to take things like music and playing there are rules to playing the piano, right? You can't break the rules and play the piano different. There's only so many keys. There's only so many things that you can do.
It's only 88 keys, and the Western scale only has 8 notes: do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Then it starts over again, right?
Right. So you have to follow the rules in order to be able to play. You can't play Beethoven and some of these great composers if you just kind of do your own thing.
Right.
And when you follow the rules, you can really, some of the music that has been created is just amazing to me, and it's just so beautiful, and you would never be able to do that without having those rules.
Can I stop you for 1 second, and I'll let you continue here? You remind me of a story I listened to. It I used to love in the 60s, Burt Bacharach. Burt Bacharach was a pop composer who created real quirky kinds of stuff. They didn't fit the norm. If you've ever studied music, he had odd chord progressions and other things he threw into, which made it stand out. And somebody asked him once, so you're a rule breaker. You don't follow, it's not just the same 3 chords and the same 3 percussion. He said, but I had to learn the rules before I could break them. You have to master the rules before you decide how to modify them. You can't just start off banging on the piano like a monkey and seeing what comes out of it, although people try these days.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think one of the other
rules, the importance of rules.
So rules are good. The other thing is sometimes we get the definitions of things really messed up, like love, for instance. People, I think, they really don't understand the true definition of love.
Okay, what is the true? Now I gotta ask. So what is the true definition of love?
Right. And so I have to admit I stole this definition from Bishop Barron.
Okay,
but it's a good one. So really, love is the willing the good of another for their own sake. You can't do it for yours. You have to do it for their sake. Then you have to do more than that. I can't just say, Paul, I love you. I will good for you, and then be done with that. I have to make a sacrifice of myself to know, well, what good would that be for you? It would have to be some kind of truth that would be good for you. And then I have to sacrifice myself, either with time or money or space, whatever it might be, to help you achieve that good. And that's really the love. That's the self-sacrificing love.
So I can't just have an aspirational goal. I think good thoughts. I will you the best. I only think good thoughts all the time. I'm a happy, positive person. My whole house is filled with positive affirmations. But I got to do something. And doing means not only taking action, but probably making some kind of sacrifice. I got to give you some money. I got to give you some time. I got to do something, and maybe you go up and I don't rise as far or something. There's a trade-off. There's a sacrifice. That's a word I don't hear much anymore, Dr. Trin. No, when I grew up, we all sacrificed for the greater good. Nobody sacrifices for anything anymore.
Not at all. Not at all. That value of sacrifice has gone away somewhere in the past.
I don't even do a sacrifice fly anymore to move the batter to the next base. I want my stats. I want the home run. I don't want to just move the batter around the thing. It's about me and my numbers. Yeah.
Right. So now you're sacrificing the game for yourself, for your own. So it's been flipped. It's been turned around.
I think that's the analogy. I think we're all in it for us. And so we reach a pandemic. Should we all sacrifice? Should we all make some choices? No. I'm going to do exactly what I want, when I want it, how I want to do it. There is no sacrifice. We used to let's all contribute to the greater good. Let's all pay our fair share. Let's all volunteer for public service. No, suckers do that. I'm in it for me, baby. And we've become extreme individuals, and to the point where we don't sacrifice for our families. We don't sacrifice for our kids. It's me, me, me.
Well, you have to be careful also with, remember, the sacrifice is for the good of the other.
Yeah.
And even though we're in a pandemic, it's not always good for everyone to do, people have to do what is best for them, for their situation, for their families. And in order you can't just blanket and say, you can't do a blanket statement and say, this is what everyone should be doing.
Right.
Because in order for you to actually know if that's true or not, you actually have to get to know that person, their situation, their families, everything about that person, and then try to figure it out.
Then we're back to the
hard.
individual again. If there are no rules and no authoritarian, I'm sorry, just do it this way because this will work better for everybody here. Then we're back to individualism.
For the individual as well as truth for yourself, which is God, and you can't do that without God. So yeah.
All right.
It all comes back to God.
It all comes back to God. So in the remaining moments here, give us a summary of the trilogy. This I can't even say the word. Is it penury? Is that it's such
penury, yes.
It's an antiquated word that nobody uses very often.
I'm trying to bring it back. Yeah.
You're so single-handedly bringing back penury. Peter's pence, the notion of the poor. All right. So what does the trilogy teach us or tell us?
Okay, so I guess in a nutshell, the 3 volumes. So the first volume, as I said, was the extreme poverty of living without God, what that looks like. In the second volume, it's when you start to come to know God and you start to empty yourself out of all the things that are really bad for you. And you start to realize, okay, this isn't good for me, this isn't good for me. And you start to empty yourself out of that. And as you start to know God more, the true good and the truth, and you start to realize, well, I'm not as good as I thought I was. And you start to empty yourself out of all those things that you know are not good for you. So the second volume is really one, it's the teaching of faith in God and getting to know God so that you know well enough the things that you know that are not right for you, and you start to empty yourself out of those things. So it's the extreme poverty of going through the process of that emptying out of all the things that are bad. And then that third volume is, well, once you start to do that, you empty out all of those, the sinful things, the bad things that you don't.
The harmful things, the hurtful things, the ones holding you back. Why do I keep doing this? Yeah.
God starts to pour himself in, and then that's when you can start to live in the divine life. And when you're living in the divine life and you're in complete, synchronization with God, so his will and your will now become almost one, and you're united in that way. Now you completely trust in God, and you know that because he loves you and you love him, and you have that complete trust, you know that you can rely on him and you don't have to worry anymore. I don't have to worry for tomorrow. I don't have to worry for my own cause, my own self, my own preservation, because I know that God will take care of that for me. And so now you're living in this extreme poverty of, I don't care if I have things. I don't pursue things just for the sake of pursuing things that I might have them. I can know that when I get to the place that God will have already provided those things for me. And I'm not saying that you just lay in bed and wait for things to be brought to you. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying it relieves the anxiety and fear in the pursuit of trying to pursue things for yourself to make sure that you have enough to get to the end, right?
And it
you
seems
rely
like
on God that'll be there.
It seems like there are 2 underlying things, again, to go back to Dr. Trin's point. We used to somehow accept that there was a plan and a greater purpose. I don't know that many of us start with the word accept. I have to accept my role. I have to accept this plan. I have to accept the way things are. The hell I do. I'm an American. I'm an individual. I can do anything I want to do. Nobody can tell me otherwise. There are no limitations on my life. There are no rules. There is no plan in place. It's a blank slate. I'm making it up as I go. Make it until you fake it. We have this resistance and I'm the king of it, this resistance to accepting anything. God's plan, any plan, the structure, the rules, following, listening, being led. I don't know that what do you think, Dr. Trent? I don't think we're good at not only are we not good at making sacrifices, I don't know that I accept much of anything anymore. What do you think, Dr. Trent?
Yes, we're like I say, our values have changed, and so we live in this era where anything goes. Pretty much, that's the problem.
And we worship that anything goes is good. That no rules, no limitations, no. I don't accept anything. You say I can't do it, I'm going to show otherwise. You say that's not the way of the world, or that's not good for you. The heck with you. What do you know? I'm the master of my own destiny. I'm the king of my own life here. And yet we are flopping around because we don't see any plan or purpose, and we're empty. Many of us, yeah.
We're empty. We chase after things, and yet in the office I prescribe more antidepressants than ever before.
Yeah. Right, because we're not good. I'm trying to play the music of my life, but I won't listen to you this way. I don't want to take any lessons. I don't want to listen to your authority. I don't want to learn any rules. I don't want to realize I might have certain limitations in my body, that I'm never going to be a great pianist. I'm just going to bang away at the keys like a little kid and then cry when I don't get the results I want.
Exactly. It sounds like the John Williams Orchestra, right?
Yeah, or John Cage, this free form, anything goes. We worship the unusual and the bizarre, and I get it. I'm the epitome of the bizarre and the unacceptable. I've written my whole life that way, and I've broken every rule and not followed the plan and all that stuff. I'm guilty as charged, and I don't know that worked out always the best for me here.
Well, there's still time.
Still time. That's good. Always hope. But it starts with
God's still giving you the nudge.
I'll give you a classic. I'll give you a very tangible example that I think in my life brings this to light. So I don't have any biological children. I adopted a girl, and I'm a good Irish Catholic. And I'm sitting in Mass one day, and somebody came and talked about all the kids in foster care, 500,000 kids that are never going home to anybody here. We took them out to save them, but then there's nobody to take over, and the kids fall right back into even worse circumstances, poverty and prostitution and drugs, and because they don't know, do they age out of the system and nobody took them? Mm-hmm. And now what do we do with them? We just send them back out on the street as orphans here. All right, so I said, I'm going to do something. I'm going to take one of the things. And my wife looks at me, she said, well, we could have talked about this 20 years ago. We were like in our 50s. Why didn't we do this when we were 20 or something, or 30, or where we could have done something? I don't know. This is the moment, and I'm going to change everything, and it took this on. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go. I got a good job. I got a good background. I got a good relationship. I'm a good Catholic. I'm going to get a kid by Tuesday. I'm a command and control guy. I'm just going to take control of this situation. We're going to do all the right things, fill out the forms. And months went by. A year went by. We got nothing. And people are looking at us like, what's wrong with you? And why aren't kids? And I would go to these people, and what's wrong? What's the problem? And they say, just trust. Just accept. There's a kid out there. We'll find them. Just accept. And I couldn't just sit back and wait. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait. And it was until I finally gave up and said, I guess this ain't going to happen, that it happened. Poof. And we adopted our daughter, found our daughter. But that is still struggle. That's the problem with faith. Yeah, I want to believe, but I got to do something right now to take charge. Especially as a guy, I got to take control of this situation here.
So that reminds me of, so you didn't learn from your Old Testament scholarship.
No, I didn't learn anything.
That's the story of Abraham and Sarah, right? God promised them a child.
Yeah. And
they kept saying, well, we're way too old for this. And they were waiting for a while. And they got impatient. And then Sarah says, well, take my handmaid and have a child with her.
Yeah.
And that now we have the whole, Isaac and Ishmael thing, which didn't go so well for for
No.
for humanity. Right now we have these two competing, religions that have been fighting ever since. And so that's the problem when we don't wait for God's mission for us. We need to let it come to us, because when we try to push it or we try to do something else, we start making mistakes. And then God has to try to make some good out of those mistakes. So God's always making good out of the crazy things that we do.
Yeah.
So eventually it all comes out for the good, for the better. But sometimes going
So I hear
pain,
three
the
modern
stuff.
American virtues that don't necessarily work good for us. One, no rules. My way is the only way. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to do it. I can do anything I want to do. Two, so there are no rules of structure to any of this stuff here anymore. Two, I don't want to sacrifice. If it means I got to give of myself and do something, I got to make a sacrifice. I'm not sacrificing nothing for something later. I want it now. And then it's this idea of accepting and waiting and being patient. I want an answer. I want 3 answers to my life tomorrow, and I want immediate action. I want immediate. There's no delayed gratification in this guy's life here.
Those are actually un-American, because the framers of the Constitution in America, they liked the rules. In fact, they put them in place.
They put them in a piece of paper. Yeah.
They liked sacrifice. Otherwise, who was running around saying, "Give me liberty" or "Give me death"?
Yeah, Patrick Henry. Yeah, right.
And then what the third one was? What was your third one?
Waiting, patience.
Waiting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
acceptance.
America's unfinished, right? The framers believed that America was always unfinished, and that we were to continuously, with God as the overseeing entity of America, we were to keep pursuing God so that we could finish America in the way that it was supposed to be finished. So we threw out all our founding principles and went to the direct opposite.
Which is a very childlike attitude. Me, now. Don't tell me what to do. Right.
That's what I call memes, meme. They're all about
me. That's a good point. Yeah, memes are all me. What do you think,
Look
Dr.
at
Trin?
me.
Are we too much me and not enough accepting, denying, sacrificing, greater good, greater picture, plan?
Yeah, personally, yes. I think the pendulum's kind of gone one direction, and the pendulum in society swings both ways,
Right.
And it can swing one way too far versus the other way. And I think the answer's somewhere in the middle with that, where we used to have a society with intact families and not a lot of divorce, and
some kind of traditional, some kind of structure,
yeah.
and then we threw all that out because it's stifling, it's
threw it all out.
restrictive,
Yes.
it doesn't fit
Yes.
everybody, and so I had a college when I went to law school. The first lesson I learned was our system is set up in conflict. It's the right of the individual versus the will of the majority, and sometimes majority rules. And sometimes the individual gets to do whatever they want to do. And it's a constant fight of the battle. You can say anything you want to say, but you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. We figured that one out. There are limitations. There are boundaries. And we're always, in today's world, where no boundaries, no rules, no limitation, immediate gratification, mostly about me. And at some point, we've got to get back to balancing that with a sense of greater good, greater purpose, greater plan in place here.
So I actually have to, not to change the subject much, but one of the things that I wrote in the PENURY CITY trilogy was, you guys have to move, because I threw part of California into the ocean.
Well, so many would like
north,
to. Yeah.
If you move north, like of Santa Barbara, you'll be all right.
We'll be okay. So, all right, good.
But
So,
I did make up for it though, because I put a Vietnamese character in named
Perfect.
Tien.
perfect. All right. Now you got
think
Dr.
Tien-
Trin on board. Right.
Yeah, so Tien isn't that's angel, right? That's archangel or messenger in Vietnamese, isn't it?
I think so. I'm the wrong person to ask. My Vietnamese so bad.
He's become so Americanized since he came over here at 5 or 6 here. He's always, we have people on that a very common last name in Vietnam is, it looks like Nguyen, but it's Win. It's pronounced in Vietnamese. You have to learn that immediately. Nguyen is win. And Dr. Trin still brings these guests on from his own community and says, welcome to Miss Nguyen. And I'm like, didn't you even learn how to pronounce Vietnamese? You know, you're become so assimilated here now.
Yes.
Well, I think you're at the core of something here, and I think Dr. Trin is too. We're in a pendulum time, and I don't think it's the end time. I think it's the end of the swinging 60s, and it's swinging back to something, a more traditional path, a different. It won't be the same path. It's going to be a different version of this, but something. There are people still craving meaning, purpose, plan in a world that. Those are not questions people asked. It was immediate. It was now. It was anything goes, and that if it feels good, do it. You know, that whole notion, left and right. You know, this isn't just a left wing, right wing kind of thing. This is an underlying value, I think, proposition, and I think that's why people have thrown out God and belief and trust. And we don't trust anybody. We don't believe in anything here. We doubt everything, and the only thing that's whatever I think feels good. We're in a feel-good society. It's not. There is no. What's the only judge? How does it feel?
You know, I think. I think you're right. Where society's starting to turn around, mainly because God had put it into our hearts. You know, this unrest that until we get right with God, we're always going to just be miserable and restless. And like I said, Jordan Peterson, he wrote this best-selling book that basically told all the young people to get out of bed and make your bed, clean up your room.
That's right. Yeah, right. I remember reading some of that. Right.
And everybody is just, loving it because they want. You have an empty life when you don't take on responsibility.
Right. Or structure. As much as we hate. Yeah, we need some structure. We need some boundaries. We need some plan, some purpose, some direction. And
do you have a website?
Yeah. Where do we get this?
Go to?
Yes, it's being published by woundedcrowpublishing.com, or if that's too hard to remember, you can also do PENURYCITY.com.
And that's PENURY for those that haven't heard that term in a while. Penury City. All right.
Right.
All right. Well, I wish you the best of luck on this stuff here. We've just scratched the surface. I know you wanted to go deeper into the book, but we're out here at 30,000 feet talking about the overall society we live in and how it got this way. And your book offers some, I take it, I haven't read it, some tangible examples of what happens when you take away all the rules, all the beliefs, like in God, what happens, and how maybe that's not, there's a balance in between here somewhere. Well, take us out, Dr. Trin. What do you think?
Well, I think he's definitely onto something here. And thank you so much for coming on. We got to continue this discussion because this is important with the way society is going, with the way that, God is out of the picture. And it's not necessarily good. And so would love to continue this chat at some point. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Trin, and I definitely appreciate your work as well. It's a great thing that you're doing and helping with Alzheimer's, and I mean, that's great. So,
which clinic are you at?
I'm hanging out admitting COVID patients.
Where are you at right now, Dr. Trin? You're getting ready to go rounds, I guess, here.
I'm in the ER.
In the ER, getting ready to go. The extreme, talk about in the moment. I got a crisis right now. There's no tomorrow, and we live our life too much that way. We're in the constant ER. We're not.
That's right.
We're not looking at long-term health care plans, not religious, spiritual plans. Everything here. Maybe that's it. We got to get out of the ER. All right. Thanks for coming on. We'll have to have you come back and go deeper into the book next time here.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me. Grateful for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks for coming on here, guys.
Okay. Take care, Dr. Trin.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it. Boy, we just touched on so many nerves here today, as we often do in the show Letters to God. What happens when you remove God? That seems to be where we're at today. Go read this trilogy to find out more. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net.